like you said, because this is going to be some of the most punishing affixes that we have, and thankfully it is going to be on that lower keystone level. So we'll see what these teams have in store, as we want to see what kind of strategies we're going to look for at a Goose Club and Obey Alliance as Halls of Atonement gets underway.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things with Necrotic Halls of Atonement, I'm interested to see if they have realized about that Clea tech yet, Dratnos, that we have learned about as of the past couple of days. Dratnos, do you want to explain that for the viewers about how the Kyrian file and the Clea tech works?
Yeah, a mid-tier influencer shared it on Twitter recently that you can use Clea, you can use the Clea Soulbind tree as a Kyrian player and actually get your Necrotic removed when you file. And as a healer, you can even have that benefit shared with the lowest health member of your group, which can be your tank, ideally, right? So you wait until your tank is the lowest health member of your group, and you yourself are damaged. If you're a priest or a paladin, you have abilities in your kit that damage yourself, right? Light of the Martyr or Shadow Word Death to enable you to then use your file and remove the stacks of Necrotic from your tank. Very powerful play, this set of affixes.
Yeah, and it can absolutely be super useful, but they do have to have multiple people running that Kyrian Soulbind. It looks like Goose Club, though, on the right side of our screen is having a couple of issues. They've already had a death, and now their tank is just so low. Their healer's 6%. Oh, another death coming out of that Windwalker Monk, the second time he's died this pull. And Dratnos, this is starting to just become a problem for them.
Yeah, and this is where things start to get so rough as well, because look at all that sanguine puddles, and you can see the mob's health here. These mobs are all so high on health, and this pull is still so dangerous, and they are out of their resources, and mobs are also not nice and packed up anymore for easy AoE damage. They are going to try and salvage this with a little bit of a pull. Meanwhile, though, Obey Alliance already well into their next pull and way ahead on trash count.
Okay, so the Obey Alliance, Skylark, and that whole entire team is only running one Kyrian, so they don't have anybody who can file for him. However, Skylark is playing that Ascendant file, which doesn't let you get stacks of Necrotic reapplied to you for 8 seconds after you cleanse it off.
Yeah, I think we also have a debut of a new spec in this MDI season, if I'm not mistaken. The Unholy Death Knight out of 40, I believe, is our first time seeing that this split. And yes, definitely going to be something to watch. Also playing Venthyr on that Unholy Death Knight also. So Swarming Mist, a very strong Covenant's ability for AoE damage on that spec. Let's see how well he can do on this pull up against the Fire Mage. So far, kind of holding his own here. Not looking bad at all on the red class.
Yeah, it's interesting because we saw Unholy DK basically in every single run last season, and they've kind of just like fallen out of favor for other options potentially this season. However, I do still think it's very, very good if used properly, and I do think that this composition that's coming out of Obey Alliance with that Shadow Priest, with that Fire Mage, has a lot of potential to be super good. On the other side, Goose Club just having a couple more issues, having a full wipe, Vicklin laughing, realizing that, oh no, things are just kind of starting to fall apart. The MDI specifically is so momentum-based that once you have a mistake on the first pull, it's really hard to claw it all the way back, and it becomes a problem whenever you have things like this happening now, too.
This dungeon with these affixes in particular, I think, is by far the most likely candidate to end up like this, right? Like these pulls are just so deadly and present so many opportunities for things to start going a little bit wrong and then snowball into being very, very wrong.
A lot of it wrong.
Yeah.
I think like Sanguine Depths is also probably in that camp this week with it being a 22 inspiring, but at the same time, this Halls of Atonement is absolutely brutal. Now Obey Alliance here has pulled the Shard, getting in one of those loyal Stoneborns into this pull as well. I think Skylark probably should have his Ascendant file back available for him. And it seems like Obey Alliance has just kind of been pulling a little bit conservatively, just relative to what we saw last weekend out of a lot of the teams, making sure that they were doing multiple Shards with their first pull. But Goose Club, while they were going equi-size, a little bit bigger, even potentially, they've been punished for it. So maybe Obey Alliance's read on how big they needed to pull inside of this dungeon was maybe more spot on with the risk-reward values for that kind of thing.
One beautiful thing about their composition as well, Death Grip is actually such a great tool against Necrotic Sanguine, because unlike stuff like Ring of Peace, you know, all the sort of less precise but more AoE oriented knock and displacement effects, Death Grip can really carefully be used to make a mob go in the right spot for both affixes at the same time, right? Usually if you're just kind of knocking everything, that's when you're likely to have maybe some Sanguine problem if you're knocking against Necrotic or vice versa. But with Grip, you can really carefully grip things exactly where they need to go. You only get the one grip, and notably, by not playing Necrolord, he doesn't have grippy hands, right, to grip everything around using that effect. But even that one grip can be enough if it's used really, really, really well.
Yeah, so now Obey Alliance getting down their first Tormented mob, and I suspect that they're going to pull all of the trash on top of Halkias. This is like one of the most deadly pulls in the dungeon, especially on Necrotic. They do not have access to Blessing of Protection, so Skylark won't be able to get like an easy reset on his Necrotic from that. Oh, look at this. They're even gathering even more trash inside the courtyard, grabbing more of these Gargants, Hound Masters, Obliterators even. Oh, and they're line of sighting them onto the corner, as opposed to doing that middle pack that we saw very frequently done last weekend.
This is so sketchy because they need to worry about necrotic stacks on the tank, and they need to make sure that they are ready to deal with all of this Sanguine. If Halkias gets a couple of ticks of Sanguine healing, then this pull will not have been worth it. So they really need to make sure that as these mobs are dying, they are carefully moving everything. And Halkias in particular, you know, he gets to this point in this fight where he stands still for 10 seconds. If he has Sanguine underneath him at that time, then that is just a huge, huge catastrophe. Look at the way Skylark is managing this movement, though. Has to be really careful here as well, because the boss does the targeted slam on the tank as well. That needs to be not hitting anybody else.
Yeah, and it's also really hard whenever you have multiple people in melee. You have that Holy Paladin and that Unholy DK, trying to make sure that they are in melee just as often as possible, and just dealing with that. It can be dangerous whenever the boss is being swung around, like you did see. Now Obey Alliance here has their first set of beams on Halkias. Do you expect them to pull any more trash from this boss?
Yes, I think they are going to pull these mobs. Now, to be fair, I saw them pulling them as I started answering that question, but it looks like it's just going to be the Toiling Groundskeepers coming in for now. Not that middle pack that you identified earlier. At 76% count, they are going to be looking for a little bit more than just these Groundskeepers, I believe. So I think these Groundskeepers are going to get them up to 78%, but they need 80, well, 79 point a lot, before they can go up to the rest of the dungeon. So let's see where they decide to go from here. Be really careful, because these Groundskeepers do drop Sanguine. Halkias is at 2%, but that could be 100% very quickly. They've done it, though. They've killed Halkias first.
Yeah, that was very important. So now they're up to 77. Oh, okay,
79. Oh, maybe they had it. Yeah, I think that could be enough then. Of course, we don't see the exact percentage, like the decimal point. So yeah, they are vibing. 80% is the number they needed, and they can go all the way now to the rest of the dungeon. They have all the trash they need.
Yeah, so now they are all on their way towards Echelon. The Goose Club actually retooled a little bit and were able to recover a little bit. Their trash is looking a bit dire, but they are getting Halkias down, sub 40%, while Obey Alliance on the other side have Echelon engaged. I think the Goose Club is in potential range where if Obey Alliance has a massive wipe, the run back plus just the time that they would take to have to repull and redo what they were doing could allow Goose Club to come back in, but they are certainly in dire straits right now.
Yeah, this is a huge, huge advantage for Obey Alliance, but it's worth mentioning that really only like 1.5 pulls went horribly wrong for Goose Club, right? Really just that one kind of first pull was a prolonged disaster. Obey Alliance, if they were to have something similar happen on their next pull, it would be even more costly because the run back would be so much more prohibitive from this point in the dungeon. So they are well ahead in terms of time, but they do not have a big safety margin in terms of how many costly mistakes they can actually withstand here and maintain their lead.
I think it comes down to the fact that Halls of Atonement is something in the range of like between a 12 and a 15-minute dungeon. Just kind of depends on the affixes and how and the dungeon level. But for MDI settings, it's somewhere in the range of like that 12 to 15-minute realm. So, like you said, one absolutely costly mistake could put Obey Alliance back at a really rough spot. Also, the checkpoints in here, you spawn right at the beginning, so them having to run back would be potentially dangerous. So here's one of the biggest question marks for Obey Alliance. Are they going to pull Varuth, or are they just going to go into the third boss? Because we've seen teams... It kind of varied last weekend. We saw a lot of teams play double Tormented Mob with Lord Chamberlain. We saw a couple of teams play 3 Tormented debuffs with Lord Chamberlain. Don't comment on it. I saw it too. Don't comment on it. And Obey Alliance is actually skipping Executioner Baru and pulling all of the trash right into High Adjudicator. Don't talk about it.
All right, yeah, they are indeed doing just that. And because it is only the 19 fortified level, I think that's why they're comfortable stacking so many tormented auras onto the last boss. The healing reduction will be a big challenge for them with Necrotic, though, but that is a thing for the future. In the present, right now, they have to deal with all of these trash enemies, plus this third boss, and this is actually quite dangerous for their tank here. You can see they've already cycled through Bop. They are running low on ways to remove these stacks of Necrotic. Skylark is kind of being forced to kite here. 22 stacks is not too lethal, but he does refresh up to 23, unable to drop stacks. This is starting to get a little bit dangerous for him. Watching his health bar, just having trouble recovering.
Oh, no! Our boss is at full health again.
Oh, and all of that time saved by pulling the trash onto the boss evaporates in a heartbeat with that Sanguine healing. Luckily for them, this is not the kind of error that is going to cost them their lead, but it is going to take a chunk out of it, and Goose Club are now in a spot where they could plausibly catch up if just a couple more medium-sized things go wrong for Obey Alliance.
Yeah, how long do you think that mistake costs them too? Because one of the things, they're not going to overcommit their offensive CDs because they've practiced the dungeon in a very specific way that they know how many CDs that they can and can't use, so they're just going to be hitting this boss with a bunch of filler abilities because they don't want to be overcommitting things that they've assigned elsewhere. And I think that mistake ends up costing them about 45 seconds.
I would have said 45, yeah, that was going to be my number as well, so I think we're on the same page on just how bad that Sanguine healing was.
That was not good.
Alright, Goose Club also going to be skipping Varuth here, using that Mind Soothe technology. Oh, Tobo! Tobo, unfortunately there, yeets on into the pack as Windwalkers are wont to do. Doesn't even press any damage buttons.
Oh, no.
It does end up going down. And now the entire team here of the Goose Club are going to fall, except for... Are they going to be able to land like a battle res here? Looks like they're maybe looking for it, but aren't going to do it. And now that means that entire run back needs to be done. Looks like it's just going to be Tobo who will then do a res on their healer once in range, but still... This is so
did you know that geese are vicious and they have teeth and they will bite people and or animals?
I didn't know that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Tobo does have so he's in combat. Needs to be careful here as no.
He's laughing. They kind of know that it's over. After that mistake, that's a massive, costly error. And Obey Alliance now onto Inquisitor Cigar. They're popping a bunch of their CDs here. They even used Army to be able to push Cigar. Man, that feels like a pretty heavy commit on the cooldown department for this guy.
It is a 19 fortified, so you don't need as much damage for the last boss, but you do, because it's fortified, need to make sure you're killing Cigar before he gets to his second Dark Communion cast.
They have a loyal Stoneborn here, and they also committed Combustion, Void Eruption, and PI. That really felt like a heavy commit on that one singular mob.
Now they are into that last boss with 3 tormented auras. Most of their cooldowns are available here. But yeah, like you said, Army of the Dead not among them. Most of the other stuff, though, should be coming up during this fight. Actually, you know what? I'm not even sure most of these cooldowns are going to come up during this fight. Wings still has 1:10 on it. I guess this fight's going to last that long. But yeah, they're going to be... Okay, they're just going to fire off the Bloodlust right now. They are not waiting for Ashen and Wings. They are just getting in there with the cooldowns they do have, which is basically none. It is basically no cooldowns being used with this Bloodlust. It's Combustion only. Yeah.
I don't love that. I must admit, I do have to question why they're lusting on that CD set. It comes down to how much they really needed to commit to Cigar, and I guess that just my opinion is that was probably an overcommittal on Cigar, especially since they did also have that Stoneborn on top of it. They probably didn't need to burn as much as they did, but if they absolutely had to commit that much, then it would potentially be a time save to burn a cigar like that, I guess.
Even with all of these Tormented Auras, though, they are making this boss look so easy. Remember, they're taking
there's
amounts
Ashen.
of extra physical damage. They are much slower, and they're taking much less healing. But even with all of those restrictions, they are making this boss fight look easy. You know, their health bars are staying solidly high. They are doing this trick where you can have just 2 people soaking all 4 of the beams by getting right under the boss's hitbox there, really minimizing the amount of damage that goes out because it doesn't even double the damage on those 2 targets. It just does 1 beam's worth of damage despite you soaking 2. And with all of that put together, 15 minutes and 9 seconds is going to be the final time here for Obey Alliance as they take a 1-0 lead in the series.
That's right. Obey Alliance, 0 deaths, 15 minutes. We mentioned it before going into the series. Well, credit where it's due. Zyro, you mentioned it, nailed it right on the head, that Obey Alliance last season was very well known for having just extremely clean execution. And here it is on display once again in the first dungeon.
Yeah, clean execution deaths-wise. They may have healed a boss to full, like, from 30 HP, but we're not going to mention that. Well, I just did, But yeah, no, that's pretty much exactly what it is. Their execution, aside from that one very egregious thing happening, was where we expected Obey Alliance of old to be. Now, we could talk a little bit more about what kind of comps are going to be best for this and why things like DK aren't quite at the top of the meta, but it's the first round. I don't want to go too in-depth. They might have better things planned for later rounds, so I want to see more of what they have to offer before I get quite too far into talking about what they're playing.
Yeah, right here, 15 minutes, 7 seconds, and the potential for them to go even faster. I mean, important thing as well to note on this one, Dratnos, is that, you know, we've been able to go down the line seeing all the dungeons thus far, but we haven't seen every single team playing them yet. So there could be some pretty high expectations as well when we're looking at complexity or when we're looking at ambition as to what they could be bringing to the table if they eventually start running this one.
Yeah, I'm excited to see when we do get those sort of powerhouse top-seeded teams matched up in Halls of Atonement, if that is something that happens this weekend, because specifically these affixes lend a degree of volatility to Halls of Atonement that it doesn't, normally you'd associate with dungeons like Necrotic Wake, but with these affixes, that it is the Halls that is going to be the one where maybe the fastest time in the dungeon is like 13 minutes, but even the best teams will be capable of like 20-minute disaster runs because of these affixes.
That's right. And Zyro, let's start talking about, some of the little disasters that were happening with the Goose Club, having some big honkin' wipes here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it beforehand. They do have extremely high caliber raid players, but that doesn't always necessarily perfectly translate over into specific MDI style scenarios. I mean, a lot of these dungeons are very specifically tailored to exact cooldown timings. And if you do ever end up wiping a single time, we've talked about this before, it throws off your entire rotation for the next 10 minutes of the dungeon. It's really hard to come back from that. You got to wait for your Ashen. You got to try to do a pull again without Ashen. It doesn't really work. You wipe again. It's not great. We just have a nice slow-mo here if they're boss healing to full again.
No.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's just, it's really hard, and you have to put a lot of work in to be great at the MDI. It's not easy to just raid and then come over and be like, yeah, I can do dungeons.
Yeah, absolutely. We looked at how we only see like a sliver of that as well in the MDI titles. We look at just the final product for a lot of these teams, and sometimes they just have it down flawlessly where 9 out of 10 times they're going to get the pull off. It's going to be successful. It's going to look great. And some teams are at like 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 or something like that, and we don't see as successful or as consistent, that's our buzzword, of runs.
Yeah, we are very results-based here at the MDI. At the end of the day, you have to come and be able to deliver on broadcast day. It doesn't really matter what time you got during practice, unfortunately, and you have to be able to execute just absolutely tip-top of perfection. Spires of Ascension, one of those dungeons that also pretty rough in terms of execution, making sure that you get all of your kicks, making sure that you have your pull set up in a way that is not going to come back to bite you, making sure that your melee don't get meleeed by the Spiteful. Things like that are very important, and it is very punishing in some of these dungeons, especially on some of these affix combinations. And Spires of Ascension is going to be one of the ones that we have to watch out for. Are there going to be errant deaths that spiral into catastrophe?
Yeah, I think another aspect of it, though, is how annoying Spiteful is in this dungeon, Dratnos, but also in something like Mists, where you need to be out of combat in order to be able to move on to the next platform, to the next area of the maze, things like that, right? It's much more than just, oh yeah, they could hit us and it's scary. It's we need to be able to skip these things more effectively.
Yeah, the joys of waiting for, the last mob to die and then the Spiteful that spawned out of it to die before you can then take the transportation service to the next platform in this dungeon. Absolutely something that will slow teams down and requires kind of disciplined play by all 5 members of the team just waiting, killing the mob, killing the Spiteful, and then going as, that saves time compared to like what normally happens in my keys where everybody just kind of leaves it at 10%, runs ahead, waits a couple seconds, turns back around, finishes off the mob, 4 people take the taxi, 1 person's waiting for their Spiteful to just expire, eventually takes it, gets yelled at for not CCing the next pull, the dungeon's depleted, it all kind of spirals out of control, so...
Yeah.
This is a very specific example. Has that happened to you before?
This is very specific. You also have names and like a list as well of these people?
This is just a hypothetical situation, okay? It's a series of potential events that you have to watch out for with Spiteful. I've done some testing to learn the possibilities of what the affix can do.
I have a specific where we left our tank behind. We're like, okay, everybody, we're going to take the little portal in Theater of Pain when we're in, the Kultharok wing and everything like that. Like, all right, everybody go click. And then the tank was the only one. We're like, all right, have fun. we'll be here waiting for you.
Bye, have a nice day.
Well, with Obey Alliance up 1, it's also going to be a good test as well, Zyro, of that consistency for the teams, of the synergy, as you mentioned beforehand. And also, another good point that you raised was, what's their group composition going to be,
Yeah, so I just kind of touched on that briefly because we know that one of the things that's going to be extremely prevalent for pretty much this entire season is going to be focused single target damage classes that gain damage from doing AoE. So things like Subtlety Rogue, things like Frost Mage. And they weren't running any of that. As a matter of fact, both of the teams were running Fire Mage, which does blast AoE, but if it uses its cooldowns in AoE, it doesn't really have much left over for single targets. So, I mean, maybe they just aren't practiced on those particular specs yet. Maybe that'll be something that they'll have to be practiced on for our dungeons tomorrow if they have time for that. But I think if either of these two teams ends up going against one of our higher seeded teams, they're kind of just going to get shredded. Those guys are going to kill bosses and prio targets just way faster.
My suspicion is that the Fire Mage was a concession to Sanguine, and like Frost Mage can cause you some problems against Sanguine. You're also everything being moved and kited away from your Blizzards and your Frozen Orbs. So my suspicion is these guys can play that spec and just chose not to in that dungeon. But I think if you're right, that's definitely something to look out for because Frost Mage brings so much strong stuff for a lot of these places.
Yeah, we'll see what these guys have in store for us as Goose Club is now down 1 against Obey Alliance. If they lose, they'll be fighting for their lives tomorrow in the lower bracket. Let's get into it as Spires of Ascension gets underway.
Ooh, 40 immediately popping that turtle as he's running through. I would say that's an interesting time to pop a turtle on a class that is not known for having great survivability.
Yeah, you do what you got to do to get through as well. It looks like they are. It is a slight difference in compositions between the two teams, and Goose Club actually just running back the same comp they did in that last place with, as Zyra mentioned, that Fire Mage. Meanwhile, Obey Alliance have made a bit more of a swap here, and they have that Frost Mage in as well. This, I think, is a great dungeon for the Frost Mage in particular, and these affixes even further enhance the Frost Mage's value because you're just getting these Blizzard ticks and Frozen Orb hits on Spiteful during the end of a pull that can then funnel even more damage into the surviving members of that pull.
Look at this. So the Goose Club, even while their Fire Mage is doing more of effective damage than that of Obey Alliance, just the difference in composition allowed them to get the first pull dealt with a little bit cleaner. Of course, there is Vikland on that Shadow Priest versus 40 on that Hunter. That is a little bit different, but
So Goose Club here have actually saved their Ashen Hallow and their wings as well. You can see it. There was actually a huge difference in paladin damage on that first pull. So maybe Goose Club are about to do something crazy here. Let's see what they are up to. Looks like they are not going to be pulling Incinerator Arcolith just yet. Maybe it's going to come with them though. Yeah, you can see the MOR popped, and I didn't quite see if a glaive went out to that tormented mob. But
look at the debuff.
There they go. Every single mob from that they were legally allowed to pull in this area has come into this pull. Incinerator, the entire trash pull, and the boss itself all coming into this big pull for the Goose Club. If they can make this work, this will be a huge time save as compared to Obey Alliance's slower strategy, but it is so scary with all of these things going on at once.
Yeah, one of the criticisms that we had last weekend with some of our teams was, are they going too big on this pull into the first boss? However, that was a Spires of Ascension that had Sanguine as an active affix, and Goose Club has one of those Rebellious Fist casts goes off. Tobo dies to that cast, and it's like we were talking about. Is this just too big? Is it too dangerous to be able to deal with? Now they're missing one of their interrupts on some of these kicks. Oh, the Inferno just gets stopped right before because Arcolith goes down. Now Tobo gets battle res with that engineering res. Ooh, they got punished super heavily. We're on the other side. Obey Alliance here with the more safe strategy of pulling Incinerator by itself have caught up and even passed Goose Club in terms of boss damage. Tobo dies again.
Oh no! They don't have a battle res here, so they're just going to have to deal with the rest of this boss fight with a player down and nearly another as well. A lot of damage coming out onto Goose Club's tank there. Obey Alliance nearly done with all of their trash as well. They do have a Goliath left, but look at this. They're not hitting that Goliath at all while it's recharging Anima, and that is 100% the correct way to deal with that ability. If you were watching Goose Club, they were actually putting some damage into those Goliaths while they were casting the recharged Anima. That ability is actually pretty inefficient to damage into, though. It puts a big shield on the Goliath, but that shield just goes away when the cast finishes, or if you DPS all the way through it. So you may as well just let all the damage be done by the cast finishing, and not actually put any damage into it, which Obey Alliance have done, and that gained them a little bit of efficiency. Mostly, though, it is going to be the death difference between the two teams here, making that boss fight so much faster for Obey Alliance. And despite doing this in one extra pull, they are now zooming ahead of where the Goose Club are at. A big bop coming out onto Skylark as well to let him start this pull.
The Windwalker Monk from Obey Alliance Boo ends up getting stunned by that Stealth Claw. That looked really dangerous, but Skylark was able to get that Stealth Claw off of the Windwalker Monk before he ended up getting meleeed by the subsequent attack. That was really scary.
Yeah, that's a case of, I'll soak the stun for you, man. Don't worry.
Don't mind if I do.
I'm helping.
He was definitely doing something. I don't know if I would have classified it as helping, but...
Look at the management of this pull here. Frost Nova, Binding Shot, Sigil of Misery, all of these pieces of utility being used to carefully manage these mobs, and then it's going to be followed by a Tar Trap into a Ring of Peace. That's the second Tar Trap that's been cast on this pull, and just look at how thought out and coordinated Obey Alliance are with this sort of mob control. Let's see how Goose Club handles a similar situation here. It's going to be a leg sweep for them as these mobs are starting to die, but you can already see that they've sort of separated mobs here, and now they have that Praetor dying in a different spot than the Stealth Claws. Obey Alliance didn't have that happen, and now these Stealth Claws are going to be moving as they're dying as well, so we're going to see this long train of Spiteful Shades kind of spread out all over the place for them. Still well handled, though, I would say, for Goose Club on the whole.
I think that Goose Club is playing like a higher DPS composition, where Obey Alliance is playing a comp that has a lot more control. And it's felt like the control of just the Binding Shot, just all of that Frost Mage slow ambient CC like that, plus the Ring of Peace on top of that additionally, has seemed like it's been just a little bit more advantageous in how the pulls are being set up over the higher DPS comp that the Goose Club has access to.
Yeah, I think that it's some of that just MDI veterancy that Obey Alliance is bringing as well. The coordinated AoE CCs in a chain that are just done. You know that in practice that was done the exact same way every time once they figured out what they wanted to do. And that just gives them this degree of predictability in the dungeon that is really a difference between MDI keys and live server keys. On the live servers, you will eventually develop that if you're playing with a coordinated group a lot. But there's a lot of stuff that kind of just gets YOLO'd, right? You're kind of using whatever ability seems good based on who has something available as things are going on. But the way that Obey Alliance plays these MDI keys is much more coordinated, much more developed plan that they then stick to every time based off of, looking outside the dungeon at just what their abilities are as they go into this very big pull now. Presumably they should have a Kyrian. Oh, actually they don't. So they don't actually have the next set of Ether Divers coming into this one. Or do they? Yeah, they actually have all of them, right? That is all of them.
Yes, they do. They're committing to just doing this pull au natural, dropping all of their offensive. Yeah, no spear, which is pretty counterproductive to what we've seen from other teams. But how they had the pack set up, where they were focusing down that one hurling mob and then just pulling the remainder of the trash into the Goliath, into those Ether Divers, that allowed them to save that Kyrian spear. And since they are running multiple Kyrians, they are able to save that spear for later on in the instance. I wonder where they're going to use the second one, because there is one very common strategy from what we've seen from MDI teams where they're pulling like some Hellions, some Justicars, those kind of mobs after the second boss and using a spear on that. But this makes me wonder where the second one is going to be. And is it potentially going to be with the Triple Angel pull? Because that would be a pretty popular one just as a whole as well. Look at Goose Club. They're doing the very typical, we're going to spear this one pack.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they only have one Kyrian, so they were always going to only be able to spear this one pack.
Right, they couldn't save that spear and have two Kyrians use stuff for later. Yeah, it's a very...
Because you can't carry two.
Right, exactly. You only have... A spear takes up a large amount of space on your back. There's not enough space for a second one back there. Obey Alliance now getting into this trash pull with the squad leader. Important to focus that down. That's one of the strengths of stuff like Frost Mage, is you can just deal a lot of damage to squad leaders because they provide an AoE damage reduction to the mobs near them. So you really need to kill them first before you then get to start doing a lot of AoE damage to all of the other targets.
Yeah. I think that, oh man, it's so weird because a lot of MDI teams basically omit as many squad leaders as possible, even omitting this one. And I think that just the time that it costs to play this squad leader is not super worth, just because of how the mobs end up functioning, where they are putting that damage reduction aura to all of the mobs surrounding them. However, what Obey Alliance is doing here, where they're pulling the remainder of that trash after they get that squad leader killed off, pulling the remainder of that trash with Ventinax, maybe it is a lot more worth in terms of value.
Yeah, this is quite a big pull going on here for Obey Alliance. And like you said, maybe that squad leader was the price you pay. You know, if you just look at it in isolation, fighting that squad leader and CCing mobs seems pretty inefficient. But then you unlock the ability to pull the trash onto the boss, as they're doing here. And with that Frost Mage, that is actually, again, another big single target DPS increase for Ventinax. You basically get to use those 4 other mobs as funnel fuel for both the squad leader and Ventinax. Pretty big value when you factor all that in.
Yeah, Ventinax now eclipsing 50% HP on the first recharge. Everybody's stacked up on the opposite side of those 2 puddles that are firing out those missiles. This is actually a great strategy for how to do this boss if you're looking for something that's more applicable to live keys, where you're stacking multiple of those puddles on one side of the room and then immediately moving the boss to the far side of the room. Going into this patch, one of the major changes to Ventinax is after the recharge, those puddles do despawn, and it makes the fight just as a whole a lot easier. But I think that how Skylark is having this tank, where there are those 2 puddles on the far side of the room, and then you move the boss the moment that the second one spawns, and you get all of your melee out of the line of fire, and allow the range to even play just on the outside of the room. This feels like it's a really easy way to just deal with this boss. And it feels like the Goose Club also is catching back up.
Now Obey Alliance all trying to jump and grab the Angel as it's flying by. Have they all done it? Yes, they have. All 5 members of their team. Nobody embarrassed and taking an extra 5 seconds. We approach the final bit of this dungeon with 70% count, so they are going to need to do a Hellion pull in this area before the last boss. Those are sketchy, but that is possibly what the Kyrian Spear is for. I think that's one of the better candidates for the use of that powerful tool. The other option, of course, being those 3 Angel mini-bosses right at the end of the dungeon.
Yeah, they've also only killed Arcoleth so far, so the ticking fire dot is not something that they believe that they can play. I wonder if they're going to kill Varuth here, because he does apply that 50% healing reduction aura.
With Grievous, I think you gotta. I'm not sure, though, but I think you gotta. Yeah, they are.
All right.
Oh,
my
wow.
God.
Double Hellion
This pull
here.
is insane.
Oh
Double
my
Hellion. They're
goodness.
obviously spearing this. It's on top of Executioner Varuth. This is something that they are committing all of their buttons to. They even dropped an Ashen Hollow. They're not bloodlusting it, but every single offensive CD is going to be used here. The first wave of terror coming out. You do see 40 and the Mage stacked up there just to be able to not be standing inside of melee. Varuth ends up going down. The Hellions are so incredibly low, and the Goliath is sitting here recharging. This is looking like they're going to get this pull done very cleanly, Dratnos.
Such a dangerous pull. 1 Goliath, 2 Hellions, and Executioner Varuth there, but the Spear just did so much work on this pull. The Spear prevented Varuth from doing basically anything. We got the 1 charge and the 1 fear cast, but really didn't end up causing that many problems, and all of that healing reduction aura was mitigated by the fact that none of the mobs were doing anything while they were affected by that spear. So a really clever way to use that resource, and now at 79% count, they have just the need for, I think, the 2 Usurper pulls? I'm not
84.
sure. Yeah,
84 is
okay.
what they need.
So we'll see
So
if they
I
can get
think-
enough just from the 2 Usurper pulls. I think they might
Okay.
be able to.
So one massive time save in this dungeon that people don't talk about enough is how are they going to be able to phase this boss? Because it was seen last week that a lot of groups were trying to two-phase this boss, but it was definitely possible to one-phase it, talking to some of the groups after the fact. And it was speculated that a lot of time was lost by not committing offensive CDs or potentially even Bloodlust, and instead going for that 2-phase as opposed to going for that 1-phase, because you end up costing yourself well over a minute trying to just deal with this extra phase on a Furion. But Obey Alliance has a lot of things, a lot of tools in their arsenal, and I wonder what they're going to commit here.
Yeah, Icy Veins is available. We should have a Kyrian Resonating Arrow. In addition to that,
True Shot.
Xuen, the White Tiger, also will be available for this. So they
They're
have,
eyeballing some trash.
they have pretty much everything here. Yeah, let's see what they are going to be up to. Yeah, they are going right into trash during, so this is going to be the recharge soon as well. And they are going to be doing big AoE damage into this boss and into this trash during this recharge. Oh, this is so cool. Look at all this damage they're deploying here. This is so efficient. And now they don't need to get that other side of Usurpers or anything as well. This is all the count they're going to need as they go into a Sigil of Silence, into a sweep. And that's basically all they need to handle this trash. And that further enhances their funnel into the boss also, because they have all this trash here while they're doing single target damage. And because of that, the Frost Mage has just annihilated this boss. It's now at 14%, and I think that's low enough that they can just kill the boss and they don't need to worry about waiting for the next recharge phase.
Yeah, it's. I think that them having to deal with 15 or so percent during a normal phase is actually fine relative to the value of pulling that trash with that. I think if they elected to not pull any trash with it at all, they would have been able to just smoke the boss and kill it all the way through. However, they decided that getting a little bit of extra trash count is something that they are looking forward to. And why are they getting so
they
much?
need 88%, not 84.
Oh,
right?
is it
It's
88?
88 because you get 4 from each of the, tricked me.
I
Trixie
have
Devils.
lied.
Yes.
I've lied, apparently.
Yeah. So now they have enough count. Because,
Okay.
88%, and then you get 4 from each of the 3 mini-bosses. So they are now all set. Meanwhile, though, Goose Club are not far behind either. Goose Club are pulling this Goliath. They're almost done with it, and then they'll be going into Orpheron themselves. So you know what? Even though they're like a boss fight behind, Obey Alliance could easily lose that much time and then some on this Triple Angel. We have seen teams lose far more time than this gap to these 3 mini-bosses if they are not handled well.
They have Lust and a Spear still. So there is a lot that they can commit to this. It's just a balancing act of how much they commit during practice. And the more dangerous thing is somebody going to die during this Triple Angel pull? I think that's always the question. Is somebody accidentally going to get hit with one of those puddles coming out of those spears? Is there just going to be something that happens? Obey Alliance immediately popping their Lust here. Ashen Hollow going down. All offensive CDs must be used. Even the wings, everything is being pumped in. And you see that Windwalker Monk just doing an insane amount of damage. Also being kept up with by the Hunter. All 3 of these Angels have to die in quick succession though, right, Dratnos?
Yeah, if any one of them is still alive a couple of seconds after the first one dies, they will full heal. So they really need to be careful here. Good news, though, the Windwalker Monk brings a huge amount of value for that with Touch of Death. So as long as they have everything fairly low, they can Touch of Death the highest health target. Here we go, the first one about to die now. It's going to be Klotos, and now they need to kill these other 2.
Oh, no.
They've done it.
Okay.
Beautiful.
This is fine.
About 1 second to spare there by Obey Alliance. So well played by them. Now all they have to do to secure a 2-0 victory in this series is defeat Devos, but they do have 2 of those Tormented Auras to deal with and the Grievous Affix active that will make this a little bit more difficult. You can see they're doing a great job here of stacking up and baiting that charge into the shortest possible distance, right?
Yes.
Baiting it right into the tip of the triangle where Kyresti is floating. You know, that will give you the smallest possible charge distance and stay with the highest uptime on the boss. Very valuable when you do have that slow aura.
Okay.
Because now you can see what happens when you don't do that, right? And everybody's kind of waddling towards the boss and losing globals.
Yeah, so 40 hates his healer, he hates his tank, and he hates his Windwalker Monk. It's just as simple as that. Whenever you bait the boss away, you're just basically proclaiming to the world that you just do not like your melee at all. Which, I mean, I guess is a fair point. It just really depends on how you feel about it. And 40 doing it again, baiting the boss in the wrong direction, proclaiming once more that he just does not like his melee or his tank or healer.
One merciful part about this fight as well is that you do lose the Tormented Auras during this intermission. So even though like the slow would be really brutal during this,
Yes.
but the boss is far enough away that you actually aren't affected by that aura. And so they are able to pretty quickly deal with this intermission. And now they are in the longest phase here, the second phase of the boss fight without as many cooldowns. They do have a lot of their 2 minutes though. True Shot, Juen, Storm Earth and Fire Charge, and a Frozen Orb, all going to be lobbed into this boss here that should actually push it down below that 30% threshold fairly quickly.
Yeah, not bad. Devos dropping incredibly low like you're talking about. Did you know that you can apply Corgi goggles to Carestia and turn her into not obnoxious angel.jpg?
Yeah, one of the many little things you could do to make your eyes a little bit more effective in this dungeon. The use of the Corgi goggles and the Inky Black Potion. Very valuable,
yes.
Actually, for visual clarity in this place.
So, for the record, we've been lobbying for Inky Black Potion weekend in Spires of Ascension, so tweet at the WoW Esports Twitter that you want Inky Black Potion weekend in Spires of Ascension, please, so you can help our cause just a little bit more.
I think what we should do is just whenever a team's local time is nighttime, we should see the Inky Black Potion on their run, and that will really help enhance the kind of international part of our tournament, right? Where we got one team, you know, it's morning over there. Obey Alliance, of course, Oceanic, so who knows what time it is over there. It's already night. Yeah, it's already night. Okay, so you Inky Black Potion, you know, for thematics. that's my proposal. But it has yet to take off. Unlike Obey Alliance's time in Spires of Ascension, 1851. Blazing fast run in this dungeon. Oh my goodness.
It's bedtime for them.
Yeah.
Obey Alliance, while they may have a number of new people on their team, they still love